The big question, has the state of Israel made contact with aliens? Well, according to retired Israeli General Professor Chaim Eshed, the answer is yes. Eshed served as the head of Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years, and he says that Israel and the U.S. have both been dealing with aliens for years. Now, to clarify, this by no means refers to immigrants. Eshed is clarifying the existence of a so-called galactic federation, and the 87-year-old former space security chief told Israel's Ynet News that lots of agreements have been made between the aliens and the U.S. to try and research and understand the fabric of the universe. Well, apparently this has all been kept a secret because humanity isn't ready. And if true, it would coincide with U.S. President Donald Trump's creation of the Space Force as a fifth branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. Apparently, Trump knows about the aliens too. Well, we have our correspondent Ariel Levin-Waldman joining us to break down the veracity of this report. So first of all, Ariel, give us a breakdown of the most shocking revelations that Israel's former space security chief has made here.
Well, you certainly covered the most shocking ones. The claim made by Professor Chaim Eshed is that we are not alone in the universe, and not only are we not alone, we're not even alone on our own planet. The claim is that we have been visited by extraterrestrial life who have set up a joint base of operations with the United States on Mars, buried beneath the surface. He also claims that astronauts from the United States have been to Mars and are working alongside the extraterrestrials at this Mars base. This in addition to the claims of a galactic federation, which, interestingly enough, echoes statements made in 2005 by former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer about visits by extraterrestrials to Earth as well. Very shocking statements, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
Right. Well, you mentioned he talks about the secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. I mean, Eshed has a serious background. This is a serious guy. Should we be taking his revelations seriously?
In the absence of such extraordinary proof, it's very difficult to take any of these claims seriously, at least not at its face value. One of the things you have to look at is just the laws of physics making things very difficult given the sheer size of space and the lack of any evidence that would directly implicate aliens in any contact in the United States or any nation on Earth. NASA's SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, has been for decades scanning the stars for any evidence at all, even distant radio signals, and has turned up very little things. With that in mind, it can't be ruled out as a direct impossibility. After all, in the past decade, upwards of 4,000 exoplanets have been discovered, and within 1,000 light years, 20 of them quite capable of sustaining life. With that in mind, even though the laws of biology and the laws of physics are the same everywhere, the chances of having any extraterrestrial visitor come here are extraordinarily low, given the sheer distances in space. Remember, 1,000 light years is much longer for anything traveling below the speed of light. And given that that is pretty much a hard-coded limit in the laws of the universe, anything coming from those distances is virtually impossible.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has pushed forward the creation of the Space Force as the fifth branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. I mean, why is he doing this, and what can you tell us about this?
So it's much more likely that President Trump's pushing of the U.S. Space Force has much to do with peer-level enemy technological threats to the United States than the existence of extraterrestrial life or the visitation thereof. Over the past few years, we've seen China reveal multiple space-based weapon systems for taking out opponent satellites, and that would be United States satellites. Russia has also unveiled similar space-based capabilities. The United States and anybody else in the modern world recognizes that satellites are more or less a linchpin of any modern civilization or modern military force. If you take out satellites, you take out GPS, and suddenly all of your ground and air forces are blind, deaf, and dumb, unable to communicate with one another or figure out any positions in the field. Likewise, in the same past few years, we've seen Russia and China develop and test hypersonic missiles. All of these are platforms that require space-based interventions to develop, to detect, and to interact with. And it's because of this that you see in the United States start putting more resources into this program. It's very telling that the segments of this new Space Force are the ones dedicated to missile counteraction and missile technologies rather than anything to do with the Pentagon's UFO programs.
Well, why do you think that Israel's former space security chief is revealing this information now, speaking out about this?
That's really anyone's guess. He said because at this point, the climate in the world has changed to the point where people are accepting that. Certainly, we've seen over the past decade conspiracy theories about aliens start to go mainstream. Just last year, you had 1 million people online say that they want to storm Area 51 to find out about the aliens. And we also saw declassification earlier this year by the Pentagon of UFO files. All of these things together create the atmosphere that perhaps we're not alone, and that in and of itself would allow anybody that deals with UFO things on a regular basis to come out and say, well, this is the time to throw your hat in the ring. Now, whether or not you can take this at face value, despite how high-ranking he is, goes back to the previous statement. In the absence of extraordinary evidence, it's very difficult to believe an extraordinary claim.